The rich rancher dared her to train his wild stallion. 32 cowboys failed. A mail-order bride won. The sun was just beginning to rise over the wide, golden plains of the ranch, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink. The air was crisp and smelled of earth and hay. This ranch wasn't like any ordinary farm. It was enormous, stretching for miles, with rolling pastures and a large wooden ranch house that stood proudly near the center. The rancher, a man known across the county for his wealth and toughness, had built this land from the ground up. People respected him, but they also feared him. He was not a man to be challenged lightly, and everyone knew it. On this particular morning, the ranch was alive with its usual sounds. The lowing of cattle, the clopping of horse hooves, and the soft whispers of wind brushing through the grass. Yet there was one presence on the ranch that drew more attention than anything else: the wild stallion. This horse was unlike any other. Massive, muscular, and untamed, it had a coat as dark as midnight and eyes that sparkled with intelligence and stubbornness. It had been on the ranch for years, and in all that time, 32 cowboys had tried to train it. 32 men, all strong and skilled with horses, had attempted to ride it, but none had succeeded. Some had been thrown off, injured, or even scared away forever. The stallion had become a legend, a symbol of the rancher's power and the impossible challenge of the land. Most people, even seasoned cowboys, avoided the stallion. They would glance at it from a safe distance, admiring its strength but knowing better than to get too close. The horse seemed to understand that it was untouchable, that it was the ruler of its own space, and it would not allow anyone to dominate it. The rancher, a proud man in his late 40s, watched the stallion with a mixture of admiration and frustration. He had tried to train it himself at times, only to be reminded of how wild and free the creature was. Over the years, he had come to enjoy the challenge, almost like a game. It wasn't just about taming a horse, it was about proving who had control. And so far, the horse had won every battle. Into this world of wide plains and untamed power came a woman. She had traveled a long distance from a small town, far from ranch life, far from anything like this. She was a mail-order bride. A woman who had agreed to marry the rancher without ever knowing the full reality of his life or his land. Unlike the cowboys, she had no years of riding experience, no muscles hardened from long days in the saddle, and no history of working with wild horses. What she had, however, was courage and determination. She had faced difficulties in her own life, and while this challenge seemed impossible, she felt a quiet confidence inside her. The moment she arrived at the ranch, the cowboys took notice. They had expected the usual timid, inexperienced woman, someone who might faint at the sight of the horses or struggle with the daily chores. Instead, they saw a woman standing tall, looking out at the land with curiosity and calm confidence. The rancher, for his part, was intrigued. He had been used to women being intimidated by him and his ranch, but there was something different about her. Something that made him wonder if she might surprise everyone, even him. It wasn't long before the subject of the wild stallion came up. The cowboys talked about it with awe and fear, recounting the many attempts of the men who had failed before. "You'll never get near that horse," one of them whispered, shaking his head. 32 men have tried. Not one of them made it. You'll get hurt if you even try." They expected her to laugh nervously or turn away, but she simply nodded. She wanted to see the horse for herself. The first time she laid eyes on the stallion, it was standing in its pen, muscles tense, nostrils flaring, ears twitching at every sound. Its dark eyes seemed to look straight through her, and she felt a shiver of fear mixed with awe. The cowboys had told her stories of how violent the horse could be, how it would kick and bite anyone who dared approach. But instead of being afraid, she felt a strange connection. There was intelligence in the horse's eyes, a spark of curiosity. She could see it was strong, yes, but also proud and lonely in its own way. The rancher watched her carefully as she stepped closer to the pen. Most people would have stopped well before this point. Most people would have been too afraid. But she walked with purpose, slow and steady, observing the stallion's movements and breathing. She didn't rush, she didn't shout, and she didn't make sudden gestures. Instead, she paused and simply watched. The stallion's ears flicked toward her, and for a moment the world seemed to hold its breath. Amused by her confidence, the rancher decided to challenge her. "If you think you can handle that horse," he said, his voice calm but firm, "you'll have to prove it. 32 cowboys have tried and failed. Let's see if you can do what they couldn't." There was no anger in his tone, only a dare, a test of her courage. The cowboys around them exchanged skeptical glances. They couldn't imagine a woman, especially one without ranch experience, being able to do something that even their strongest and bravest men had failed to do. She looked at the rancher calmly. "I'll try," she said simply. There was no boast, no arrogance, just a quiet determination. She wasn't trying to prove herself to him or the cowboys. She just wanted to understand the horse to see if she could connect with it in a way that others had not. The rancher nodded slowly, clearly intrigued but not entirely convinced. He knew it would be dangerous, but he also knew she had something different, something that might just work. For the next few hours, she observed the stallion from a safe distance. She noticed how it moved, the way it shifted its weight, how its tail flicked when it was annoyed, and how it pawed at the ground when curious. She began to understand its personality, realizing that this horse was not just wild. He was smart, proud, and careful. He would not allow anyone to dominate him, but he might respond to someone who approached him with patience and respect. The cowboys were watching too, their skepticism growing into curiosity. Some of them muttered under their breath, "She's just wasting her time." Others, more quietly, began to wonder if she might see something they had missed. Unlike them, she wasn't trying to force control. She was trying to understand, to connect. And for the first time in years, the stallion's behavior seemed to shift slightly. He watched her closely, ears twitching, nostrils flaring, but he did not snort or kick. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, she took her first careful step toward the pen. The rancher's eyes followed every movement, his expression unreadable. He had seen many people get thrown off, many attempts end in chaos. He knew the danger, but he also felt a strange sense of anticipation. Something about this woman made him curious, made him wonder if perhaps this time the impossible could happen. The stallion shifted slightly as she approached, eyeing her cautiously. She paused, letting the horse get used to her presence. She spoke softly, her voice calm and steady, and for a moment it seemed as if the stallion was listening. The cowboys exchanged surprised looks. This was new. They had never seen a horse respond to anyone like this, not even to the men who had trained for years. By the end of the day, she had not touched the horse, nor had she attempted to ride it. But she had done something no one else had managed. She had earned its attention. The stallion had watched her every move, neither frightened nor aggressive, just alert and curious. The rancher, observing from a distance, allowed himself the first small smile in a long time. He was beginning to see what others had not, the possibility that this woman might succeed where 32 cowboys had failed. As the sun set, painting the plains with golden light, she stepped back from the pen. She was tired but exhilarated. She had faced her fear, approached the untamable, and survived. The rancher came over, his boots crunching on the dirt. He looked at her thoughtfully. "You're brave," he said simply, "but bravery alone won't tame him. You'll need patience, understanding, and maybe a little luck." She nodded, ready for whatever came next. She knew this was only the beginning. The real challenge, the true test, was still ahead. But for the first time, she felt that maybe, just maybe, she could do it. She had taken the first step, and sometimes that first step was the hardest of all. The day ended with the ranch quiet again, the wild stallion resting in his pen, and the mail-order bride looking out over the plains. In that moment, it was clear to everyone, the rancher, the cowboys, and even the horse, that something extraordinary had begun. The impossible challenge was no longer a tale of failure. It was a story waiting to unfold, and its heroine was a woman who had dared to step into the untamed world of the wild stallion. After the first day of observing the stallion, the mail-order bride woke up before sunrise, her mind already racing with plans. She had spent hours thinking about the horse, watching how it moved, how it reacted to sounds, and how it interacted with its surroundings. She knew she couldn't force the horse into obedience. It would never respond to fear or pressure. If she wanted to succeed, she had to earn its trust, step by step, slowly and patiently. The ranch was quiet in the early morning. Mist hovered over the fields, and the distant sound of cattle created a calm, rhythmic backdrop. She walked to the barn first, studying the smaller horses, brushing them, and feeling their reactions. This was practice for her hands, her timing, and her intuition. She needed to be ready for the stallion, who was stronger, wilder, and more unpredictable than any other horse she had ever touched. When she finally approached the stallion's pen, he was already awake, tossing his head and pawing at the ground. The Cowboys had gathered a safe distance away, some leaning against the fences, others sitting on posts, all watching her with skepticism. "She won't last a week," one muttered. Another added, "I'd pay to see her get thrown off." They didn't realize she wasn't racing to succeed. She was learning, observing, and moving at the stallion's pace. The first few attempts were slow. She extended her hand, keeping her body relaxed, letting the horse see her without moving too quickly. He backed away at first, nostrils flaring, muscles tensing. But she didn't step back. She waited, giving him space, her voice soft and calm as she spoke. "It's okay, I'm not going to hurt you," she whispered. She repeated these words several times over the next hour, keeping her movements gentle and deliberate. The stallion's curiosity grew. He watched her closely, his ears flicking, nostrils twitching, and eyes sharp. He pawed at the ground but did not run away. Slowly, he lowered his head and sniffed the air near her. It was a small victory, but it meant progress. Unlike the Cowboys, who had tried to assert control through force, she had learned that understanding the horse's instincts, reading his emotions, and respecting his space were far more effective. Over the next several days, the routine became more structured. Each morning, she would approach the pen, letting the stallion see her, speaking softly and moving carefully. She studied his body language, how he shifted weight from one leg to another, how he twitched his ears or swished his tail, the way his eyes softened or narrowed. Every detail mattered, and every small observation gave her more insight. The Cowboys continued to watch, sometimes sneering, sometimes shaking their heads. "She's wasting her time," one said. "He's not going to let her get near him?" But others quietly started to notice a change. The stallion was no longer as tense when she approached. His body relaxed slightly, his movements less rigid, and he didn't snort or kick as often. The Cowboys didn't fully understand it, but the mail-order bride did. She knew she was slowly breaking through his defenses, building a bond that no one else had managed to create. Not everything went smoothly. On the fourth day, she made a misstep. As she reached out to touch the stallion's neck, he jerked back, startled by the sudden movement. He stamped his hoof, his eyes wide with alarm, and backed away. She froze for a moment, heart racing. She could have panicked, pulled back too quickly, or even gotten hurt. But instead, she stayed calm, taking a deep breath and allowing him to recover. She waited patiently until he settled again, then slowly lowered her hand, letting him see that she meant no harm. The rancher, observing from the porch of his house, raised an eyebrow. He had seen many people get hurt by the stallion, and most would have retreated in fear. She didn't. He saw her steadiness, her patience, and he felt a flicker of respect. She wasn't using strength or intimidation, she was using understanding. And the stallion was responding, little by little. Over the next week, she introduced small gestures to build trust. She brought a brush and gently ran it over the stallion's coat while he stood still, only inching closer when he allowed it. She left treats nearby, letting him approach them in his own time, and sometimes she simply sat near him, reading a book or humming softly. The stallion began to relax in her presence, occasionally nudging her hand with his nose or letting her touch his mane. Every small sign of trust was a victory, and she celebrated them quietly. One afternoon, the rancher walked over, curious to see how far she had come. He stood at the edge of the pen, arms crossed, watching as she slowly stroked the stallion's neck. "He's calmer than I've ever seen him," he said quietly to himself. The Cowboys, noticing his surprise, exchanged glances. They were beginning to realize that she was achieving something remarkable, something that none of them had managed. But building trust wasn't just about small gestures. It was about reading the horse's moods, predicting his reactions, and staying one step ahead without forcing him. She learned to recognize when he was irritated, when he was curious, and when he was ready to accept her touch. Each day, she adjusted her approach, keeping her movements gentle, her voice soothing, and her intentions clear. She began to understand that the stallion wasn't just untamed. He was intelligent, independent, and proud. To earn his respect, she had to show that she respected him in return. Conflict arose when a sudden storm rolled over the ranch. Rain poured down, lightning flashed across the sky, and thunder shook the ground. The stallion, startled by the sudden noise, bolted toward the fence. The Cowboys panicked, unsure of what to do. They shouted and tried to calm him with force, but he was too frightened. The mail-order bride, standing a few feet away, didn't yell or push. Instead, she knelt on the ground, speaking softly, calling his name and holding out her hand. Slowly, carefully, the stallion returned to her, trembling but trusting her presence. The rancher watched in silence, amazed. None of the cowboys had been able to control the horse during storms, yet she had calmed him without force or fear. For the first time, he realized that her approach wasn't just different, it was effective. It was something he had never seen before, and it worked. As days turned into weeks, the bond between the mail-order bride and the stallion grew stronger. She could touch him, brush him, and even lead him short distances within the pen. The cowboys continued to watch in awe, some quietly admitting that she had accomplished what they could not. The rancher, once skeptical, now began to feel a sense of pride mixed with surprise. He had dared her to try, expecting her to fail, but she was succeeding, step by step. One evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky with deep reds and purples, she stood in the pen beside the stallion. He nuzzled her gently, a sign of trust and acceptance. The cowboys whispered among themselves, finally acknowledging her achievement. The rancher approached her slowly, his usual stern expression softened. "You've done what no one else could," he said. "You've earned his trust. I didn't think it was possible, but here you are." She smiled quietly, exhausted but proud. "It's not about force," she said. "It's about understanding. He's not just wild, he's smart, proud, and deserves respect." The rancher nodded, impressed by her insight. He realized that her approach was not just about taming a horse, it was about patience, courage, and empathy. She had transformed a dangerous challenge into a connection built on trust. By the end of this part, the mail-order bride had achieved something extraordinary. She hadn't yet ridden the stallion, and she still had many challenges ahead, but she had done what 32 cowboys could not. She had gained his trust. The stallion, once feared and untouchable, now allowed her near him, responded to her presence, and even seemed to recognize her as someone different, someone worthy of respect. The ranch was quiet that night, the stars reflecting on the calm plains. The mail-order bride sat outside, thinking about the progress she had made. She knew the next steps would be even harder. Eventually, she would have to ride the stallion, to move with him and guide him without fear. But for now, she had accomplished the hardest part, building trust. The rancher, standing nearby, looked at her with a mixture of admiration and surprise. He realized that the challenge he had set, meant to be impossible, had revealed something even greater. A woman's courage, intelligence, and patience could achieve what brute strength could not. He began to wonder what other challenges she could overcome on his ranch, and perhaps in his life as well. The mail-order bride, exhausted but happy, knew this was just the beginning. The stallion had accepted her presence, and in return she had learned more about courage, patience, and trust than she ever imagined. She had taken a step into the unknown, faced her fear, and emerged stronger. The story was far from over, but she had proven one thing. With understanding, patience, and respect, even the wildest, most untamed challenge could be met. Weeks had passed since the mail-order bride first began earning the trust of the wild stallion. The horse, once untouchable and feared by all, had gradually become calm in her presence. It would stand quietly while she brushed its coat, allowed her to touch its mane, and even nuzzled her gently when she offered a treat. The rancher and the cowboys had been watching closely, amazed at how a woman with no prior horse experience had managed what 32 skilled cowboys could not. Yet, everyone knew that the real challenge had not yet begun. Gaining the stallion's trust was only the first step. The ultimate test was to ride him. No one had ever succeeded in mounting the stallion and controlling it once it was in motion. This was the moment that would prove whether the mail-order bride's efforts had truly changed the impossible into the possible. The morning was cool, with a soft mist rising from the fields. The rancher stood at the edge of the paddock, arms crossed, watching silently. The cowboys had gathered, some leaning on fences, others standing in small groups, whispering among themselves. The air was thick with anticipation. Everyone knew what was about to happen. The stallion pawed at the ground, muscles tense, nostrils flaring, and eyes bright with intelligence. It had grown used to the mail-order bride's presence, but this would be different. Riding meant complete submission to another, something the stallion had never allowed. The mail-order bride approached the stallion slowly, her movements calm and deliberate. She knelt briefly to stroke its neck and whispered softly, "It's okay, we're ready." The horse responded with a slight nudge of its nose, a gesture she had come to recognize as trust. She took a deep breath, feeling a mixture of fear and excitement. She knew this moment would test everything she had learned: patience, courage, and understanding. She positioned herself at the side of the stallion, gripping the reins gently. The horse shifted its weight nervously, ears flicking in every direction. She spoke softly, keeping her tone calm, steadying herself as she prepared to mount. Slowly, carefully, she swung her leg over the horse's back. The stallion tensed immediately, muscles rippling beneath her hands. For a moment, it felt as if time had stopped. Everyone watching held their breath. The cowboy's skepticism was replaced with wide-eyed wonder, and the rancher's usual stern expression softened as he observed the unfolding moment. The first few steps were tense. The stallion moved cautiously, testing her balance and patience. She kept her body relaxed but firm, guiding it with subtle movements of her hands and shifts of her weight. The horse reared slightly, testing her courage, but she held on, whispering soothing words and reassuring it with gentle touches. Slowly, the tension began to ease. The horse was learning that she was not a threat, that she could be trusted even in this new, challenging situation. As the morning progressed, the mail-order bride practiced controlling the stallion within the paddock. Each attempt tested her skill, balance, and calmness. The horse reared, sidestepped, and tried to shake her off multiple times, but she remained steady, never allowing fear to control her actions. With each small success, her confidence grew, and the stallion began to respond to her commands more consistently. The cowboys continued to watch, whispering among themselves in disbelief. "I've never seen anyone do that," one said, shaking his head. "She's actually getting him to listen," another added, "and she's not even using force. She's just talking to him, understanding him." Even those who had doubted her the most began to admit quietly that she was achieving something remarkable. The rancher, usually calm and collected, felt a growing sense of pride and amazement. He had seen many people fail in attempts to ride the stallion, but here was a woman without years of experience, handling him with skill, patience, and intuition. She was teaching everyone a lesson. Strength and skill alone could not tame the wild, but understanding and connection could. Despite the progress, there were moments of danger. One afternoon, as a gust of wind rustled through the paddock, the stallion spooked, rearing high and trying to bolt. The mail-order bride held on, her heart racing, whispering soothing words as she gently guided him back to calm. Her hands were steady, her voice soft, and her movements deliberate. Slowly, the horse relaxed, trusting her to guide him safely. The cowboys stared, silent, recognizing the incredible bond that had formed between the woman and the stallion. Day by day, the rides grew longer and more confident. She practiced turning the horse, stopping, and moving at different paces. She learned to anticipate his reactions, responding with calm authority rather than force. The stallion, once feared for his unpredictability, began to follow her cues willingly. Each ride became a demonstration of trust and communication, a dance between human and horse that had never been achieved before. By the end of the third week, she was riding confidently across the paddock, the stallion moving with smooth, controlled strides. The cowboys, now fully attentive, whispered among themselves in awe. The impossible was happening before their eyes. 32 men had failed, and yet here was a woman, patient, brave, and intelligent, mastering what they could not. The rancher approached her one afternoon, his boots crunching on the dirt. He watched as she guided the stallion around the paddock, a smile slowly forming on his face. "I have to admit," he said, voice calm but filled with respect, "I didn't think it was possible, but you've done it. You've tamed him not with force but with patience and understanding. I've never seen anything like it." She smiled back, sweat on her brow and a sense of accomplishment in her chest. "It wasn't about taming him," she said softly. "It was about understanding him, building trust and respecting him. He's strong and proud, and he deserves respect just like anyone else." The rancher nodded, impressed by her insight. As she continued to ride, the mail-order bride realized that her journey had changed her as much as the stallion. She had faced fear, uncertainty, and doubt, yet had grown stronger, more confident, and more connected to the world around her. The ranch, once intimidating and harsh, had become a place of learning and transformation. She had discovered her own courage and resilience, proving that determination and understanding could overcome even the greatest challenges. The final test came one late afternoon. The rancher suggested she take the stallion beyond the paddock, across the open plains. This was uncharted territory. The horse had never been ridden freely outside its safe pen. The cowboys gathered at a distance, watching tensely, expecting chaos. The mail-order bride took a deep breath, whispered to the stallion, and guided him out through the gate. At first, the stallion moved cautiously, ears flicking and muscles tense. But the woman's calm presence reassured him, and step by step, he began to walk confidently across the open fields. She guided him carefully, letting him explore while maintaining control. The wind rushed past, the grass swayed, and the sun shone brightly over the plains. It was a breathtaking scene, human and horse moving as one, a partnership built on trust, patience, and understanding. The cowboys watched silently, awestruck. They had never witnessed anything like this. Even the rancher, usually reserved and proud, felt a deep sense of amazement and respect. The stallion, once untamed and feared, now moved gracefully under the mail-order bride's guidance. Every stride was proof that connection and empathy could achieve what force and experience alone could not. By the time the ride ended, the entire ranch had witnessed history. The mail-order bride had done the impossible. She had ridden the wild stallion across the plains, earning his full trust and respect. The cowboys approached cautiously, offering nods of admiration and words of praise. The rancher walked up to her, his usual stern expression softened by pride. "You've done something remarkable," he said simply. "Not many could have done what you just accomplished. You've earned your place here, not just with the horse, but with all of us." The mail-order bride smiled, exhausted but triumphant. She knew the journey was far from over. Training the stallion to respond to more advanced commands, riding for longer distances, and continuing to build the bond would take time. But this moment was proof that courage, patience, and understanding could overcome fear and doubt, even in the face of the impossible. As the sun set over the plains, painting the sky with shades of pink and orange, she sat quietly beside the stallion, feeling its warmth and strength. The rancher and the cowboys watched from a distance, a sense of pride and awe in their eyes. The wild stallion, once untouchable and feared by all, now stood calmly beside the woman who had dared to understand him, trust him, and ride him. For the first time, the impossible had been achieved. And the mail-order bride had proven that determination, intelligence, and empathy could succeed where even the strongest and most skilled had failed. The story of the wild stallion and the brave woman would be remembered across the ranch for years to come. A tale of courage, trust, and the power of human and animal connection. After weeks of training, the mail-order bride and the stallion had formed a bond unlike anything the ranch had ever seen. The horse, once wild, untamable, and feared by 32 cowboys before her, now moved gracefully under her guidance. Every step she took, every gentle command, reflected her patience, courage, and understanding. The entire ranch had been watching her progress, and the impossible had slowly become reality. The rancher, a man known for his pride, wealth, and unshakable demeanor, found himself quietly amazed. At first, he had dared her to try simply for amusement, expecting her to fail as the others had. But now he saw her not as an outsider or curiosity, but as someone remarkable. Her patience, intelligence, and courage had not only earned the stallion's trust, but had transformed the way he viewed her. She had proven something he had never anticipated. That strength alone was not the measure of courage or skill. One bright morning, the rancher suggested a final challenge. He wanted her to lead the stallion through the entire ranch, across pastures, over small hills, and down to the river that ran along the property's edge. This would test not only her riding skills, but the stallion's full trust in her guidance. It was the moment that would prove if she had truly mastered the horse and herself. The mail-order bride prepared carefully. She approached the stallion's pen, brushing its mane gently, whispering soft words of encouragement. The horse nuzzled her hand, standing still as she adjusted the saddle and reins. The cowboys watched from a safe distance, their skepticism replaced by awe and admiration. None of them had ever seen the stallion so calm, so willing, and so responsive. As she led the stallion out of the pen, the rancher followed on horseback, keeping a close eye on her. The open plains stretched before them, golden grass swaying gently in the breeze. The stallion stepped confidently, responding to every shift of her weight, every gentle pull of the reins. It was a dance of trust and understanding, a partnership forged through patience, care, and courage. The first test came quickly. The horse approached a small hill, and instinctively it hesitated. The terrain was uneven, and the stallion sensed danger. The mail-order bride spoke softly, gently nudging him forward, her calm presence reassuring him. Step by step, he climbed the hill, trusting her guidance. At the top, he paused, looking over the pasture as if sensing the enormity of what he had achieved. She patted his neck gently, whispering, "You did it! We did it!" The cowboys, watching from below, were silent. They had never seen the stallion respond so willingly. Their whispers of doubt had vanished, replaced by admiration for the woman who had accomplished what none of them could. Even the rancher, usually stoic and reserved, felt a surge of pride. He realized that her achievement was not just about taming a horse, it was about courage, intelligence, empathy, and persistence. As they continued, the terrain became more challenging. There were narrow paths between rocks, small streams to cross, and areas where the grass grew thick and uneven. Each obstacle tested the stallion and the rider, requiring focus, patience, and clear communication. The mail-order bride guided him carefully, using gentle words and subtle movements. The horse responded with confidence, trusting her completely. At one point, the stallion spooked at a sudden movement, a deer darting across the field, and bolted. The mail-order bride held on tightly, speaking calmly and reassuringly. Step by step, she guided him back to a steady pace, never panicking, never forcing him. By the time they reached the other side, the cowboys and rancher were in awe. Few had ever managed to control him in such moments, and none had done so with such calm, gentle authority. By mid-afternoon, they reached the river. The water ran clear and fast, and the bank was slippery and uneven. The stallion hesitated, pawing the ground nervously. The mail-order bride dismounted briefly, letting him see her standing calmly, her hand extended as an invitation. Slowly, cautiously, he stepped into the water. Step by step, she guided him across, never forcing him, never losing patience. When they reached the opposite side safely, she smiled, and the stallion nuzzled her, a sign of complete trust and partnership. The journey back across the ranch was triumphant. The stallion moved smoothly, responding to her commands with confidence and grace. The cowboys had gathered at the edges of the pastures, clapping and cheering. They had witnessed the impossible, and they could not deny the skill, courage, and empathy of the mail-order bride. The rancher rode beside her, pride shining in his eyes. He had seen many try and fail, but none had accomplished what she had. By the time they returned to the main ranch area, the sun was low in the sky, casting a golden glow over the fields. The mail-order bride dismounted, gently patting the stallion and whispering soft words of praise. The horse nuzzled her once more, then stood quietly, calm and content. The transformation was complete. What had once been a wild, untamable, and feared stallion was now a partner, responsive and trusting. The rancher dismounted as well, walking up to her with a proud smile. "I have to admit," he said, his usual stern tone softened, "I didn't expect this. You've not only tamed the stallion, you've earned his complete trust. I've never seen anything like it, and I don't think I ever will again." The mail-order bride smiled, her heart swelling with pride and satisfaction. "It wasn't about taming him," she said softly. "It was about understanding him, respecting him, and building trust. He's not just a horse. He's smart, proud, and deserves patience and care, just like anyone else." The rancher nodded slowly, clearly impressed by her wisdom and insight. The cowboys approached cautiously, offering nods of respect and words of admiration. They had doubted her, laughed at her, and assumed she would fail. Now they saw her in a new light, a brave, intelligent, and patient woman who had accomplished what they could not. Even the most skeptical among them couldn't deny her courage and skill. The mail-order bride looked around at the ranch, feeling a sense of belonging she had never experienced before. She had arrived as an outsider, a woman from a small town with no experience, facing a challenge that had defeated many men. Now she was respected, admired, and trusted, not just by the stallion, but by the rancher and the cowboys who had watched her succeed. Over the next few days, she continued working with the stallion, riding him across the ranch, guiding him through new challenges, and strengthening their bond. The rancher often joined her, riding nearby and offering guidance, but mostly observing in quiet respect. He realized that her approach, based on patience, understanding, and courage, had taught everyone a valuable lesson. True strength is not only measured by force or skill, but by intelligence, empathy, and determination. Word of her success spread beyond the ranch. Neighbors and visitors came to see the mail-order bride riding the wild stallion, amazed at the bond between human and horse. People whispered about how she had done what 32 cowboys had failed to achieve, marveling at her courage and perseverance. She became a symbol of determination, intelligence, and the power of trust. One evening, as the sun set over the plains, casting long shadows across the golden grass, the mail-order bride stood beside the stallion, brushing his mane and speaking softly. The rancher walked up, his usual pride tempered by admiration. "You've changed everything here," he said quietly. "Not just the horse, but the way we all think about courage, patience, and understanding. You've earned your place here, not just with the stallion, but with all of us." She looked up at him and smiled, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. "I came here to build a life, to face challenges, and to learn," she said. "I didn't come to prove anything to anyone. But in the process, I've learned more about trust, patience, and courage than I ever imagined." The rancher nodded, recognizing the truth in her words. From that day on, the ranch was different. The wild stallion, once feared and untamed, became a symbol of the bond between patience and courage. The mail-order bride had proven that understanding, intelligence, and empathy could overcome even the greatest challenges. The Cowboys respected her, the rancher admired her, and the stallion trusted her completely. In the quiet moments, when the sun dipped below the horizon and the ranch was bathed in golden light, she would ride the stallion across the fields, feeling the freedom, strength, and trust they had built together. The journey had been difficult, filled with fear, doubt, and hard work, but it had also been transformative. She had arrived as an outsider and left as a hero, respected, admired, and beloved by everyone on the ranch. The story of the wild stallion and the mail-order bride became a legend in the area, a tale of courage, patience, and determination. It was proof that with understanding, empathy, and bravery, even the most impossible challenges could be overcome. The rancher, once skeptical, never doubted her again. The Cowboys, once critical, now looked to her as an example of true courage. And the stallion, once wild and untamed, now moved gracefully under her guidance, a testament to the power of trust and connection. The mail-order bride had arrived at the ranch with no experience, no skill in handling a wild horse, and no expectation of greatness. Yet she had accomplished something extraordinary. She had not only earned the trust of a wild stallion, but had transformed the ranch itself, leaving a legacy of courage, determination, and empathy. And as she rode across the plains, the wind in her hair and the stallion beneath her, it was clear to everyone that the impossible had been achieved, and it had been done with heart, patience, and bravery.